Good evening, everyone. That was just to wake you up because I'm the last to speak. First of all, thank you all for the opportunity to speak on this issue I'm very passionate about. Thank you, League of Women Voters, for keeping the momentum going, and this is a great turnout, and this is what we need behind the issues. And I don't feel worthy to be a part of this esteemed panel at all, and every time I come here, it repeats itself, and I wonder how. But the school-to-prison pipeline, if we want to step back and just define it really quick, you know, it's a system where students, by virtue of the schools they attend, have an increased likelihood of ending up in the prison system and, like Superintendent Jackson said, becoming triple dippers and costing us a lot of money, eventually billions nationwide. And it's not the student themselves. It's, you know, because although we've seen an increase in some sort of adolescent misbehavior, children have been children for years, right? And that hasn't changed, but our response to youthful behaviors has changed. And just looking at the numbers, we know Florida is one of the most punitive, well, actually, I would say is the most punitive state in the union. We talked about the issue of trying children as adults. You know, I have a case here in Escambia County, a 12-year-old sentenced to 35 years. And this happens more in Florida than any other state. More children are sent to the adult criminal justice system, and it happens here in Escambia more than most places in the county, so it happens here more frequently. But arrests are just part of the school-to-prison pipeline, because we've seen students, you know, for instance, a second grader can kick a desk, punch a wall, throw a temper tantrum, and depending on the environment he's in, that would be responded to differently, right? Or two kids can get into a fight, right? And if an officer's around and they're naturally using that law enforcement lens, that's assault and battery. So that's the pipeline. It's our response, our changing response to youthful behavior. And I'm glad suspensions were talked about as part of it, because that's a key part of the pipeline, you know. And if we think about what suspending a student is doing, you know, it's depriving them of a right to an education, right? An education isn't like a driver's license or some sort of privilege like that. It is a fundamental right. That's what makes it a civil rights issue. And the right to an education should never be suspended. So I'm very pleased with the work that Superintendent Jackson has done. And even here in Escambia, we've seen some improvements. But I want to step back again and talk about why I'm here. So in 2011, the Southern Poverty Law Center was fortunate to get a great person from Michigan who is here in Escambia now and worked for the ACLU. But she came and was part of our initial team that looked across the 67 districts across the state of Florida. And we looked at the suspensions, we looked at the arrests, we looked at the disparities between different groups, because we know children of color and children from lower income backgrounds tend to bear the brunt of these suspensions and arrests. And we selected 5 counties on the basis of this. And this was back in 2011 where we initially filed our complaint. And Escambia was one of them. Okaloosa was another. This was before Superintendent Jackson was in leadership. And we challenged Flagler County, Suwannee County, and Bay County as well, based off these 5 factors. So, and I'm the attorney in charge of that, so I literally have thousands of clients that I represent, and we're trying to work and move them forward. But the good news is, you know, all of these districts have shown significant improvements. And I have a statistic here. Superintendent Jackson shared that there were over 3,000 suspensions in Okaloosa before we filed our complaint in 2012. When you calculate that, you know, that's about 5,700 days of school, but about 34,000 hours of instruction time in a year, right? So think about 34,000 hours of algebra, reading, English that students are literally being deprived of and sent home. And one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about suspensions is 2 reasons, actually. One, I remember the first time I was suspended in 2nd grade. I was seated in the back row, you know, and you hand up your paper and it eventually gets to the teacher, and by the time it got to the teacher, there was a 5-letter word written on it. It wasn't my writing. I told her it wasn't my writing. My parents told her that it wasn't my writing. I still ended up missing over a week of school, and by the time I came back, I was kind of lost on, think about it, if you follow a sports team, if you miss 5 or 6 games, or if you watch a show and you miss a couple episodes, especially if it's something like Game of Thrones or one of those shows with right? You'll be lost. So this was the response to me, and then that's when I first started displaying some behavioral problems. I mean, it led to a downward spiral that led to a lot of detrimental consequences, and that's what the pipeline is. But we believe at the Southern Poverty Law Center that the right to an education should never be suspended. And it's in Escambia, before we filed our complaint, there were over 4,000 suspensions a year. Now they're about at 3,000, and they're increasing as well. And they implemented great things like the student matrix, the discipline intervention matrix that outlines, all right, instead of suspending a student, what do we do, right? Because I think the most detrimental thing about suspensions is it does absolutely nothing to the problematic behavior, right? You're sending a kid home and they're gonna come back with the same problem. Actually, the last school I was teaching at in Miami, we suspended a student for 10 days, and because the mom couldn't supervise him, she had to send him to Central Florida to be with his father. And this child was murdered, unfortunately. You might know him by the name of Trayvon Martin. Oh. Right? So he was a child suspended from a Miami-Dade public school for 10 days, and he encountered a gentleman by the name of George Zimmerman, who wouldn't have been in a school environment, right? We have SROs protecting our students from people like that. Schools have always been the safest place for children, because once they're in the street, that's the gang violence. Even though, you know, gangs and drugs can get into our schools, but they're a lot more in the community, right? So schools, and I remember for me, growing up, you know, I like going to school. That's part of the reason why I became an educator sometimes, even though I was a knucklehead, right? But, you know, the relationships I developed with my teachers, they were sometimes the only people I could talk to. And that's important. And schools are supposed to be venues of hope for students, and not places that deprive them of their rights to an education. So this is our 4th school year with our complaints. We filed them with the Office of Civil Rights, but we're actually nearing resolutions with most of them. Just last month we resolved one in Flagler County, and we entered an agreement that could eventually abolish suspension in the district. Currently, well, last year students could be suspended up for 10 days. Now that's cut to 5 in the district, and then another year it's down to 3, and then hopefully if they put the alternatives in place, then they have to eliminate it. And when I say, you know, eliminate suspension, I'm not saying eliminate accountability or what the superintendent called discipline, right? I wouldn't necessarily use the word discipline. But I think, yeah, we have to hold the students accountable for their behavior. If I kick this microphone over, you know, if you don't do anything, I might eventually kick every microphone over on this table, right? But we want to see things that actually address the issue. And I'm pleased that all of the districts, you know, have been doing these things and have been pursuing these things. So we're nearing a resolution with the districts, well, at least here with Okaloosa and actually with Escambia. Just talked with the Attorney Waters this morning. We basically, her and I came up with an agreement, or we're finalizing it now, probably done in a week or so, that adds to the great work they've already been doing and the changes they've already implemented, and just takes it a step further and does things. You know, in Okaloosa we're doing the same. And it focuses on 4 areas that hopefully dismantle the school to prison pipeline, and that the district has an interest in pursuing as well, and that they've been doing things. One is arrests, right? We know here in Escambia County the most frequent arrest is for a charge called disorderly conduct. So that's that 2nd grader kicking the desk, right? But we know in Okaloosa, just our neighbor a few districts down, I think there were only 2 arrests for disorderly conduct, but here in Escambia there were over 60, even though the district is slightly larger here, right? So one of the things we want to look at moving forward is, you know, and I'm happy Chief Alexander is here, and he's, in his leadership, you know, I'm sure the county will move in the right direction. He's what we would call in Jersey a stand-up guy, you know. Maybe I'm in an Italian restaurant, I feel inspired to say that. But he's a stand-up guy, so we could actually just examine, like, all right, what's going on here with these disorderly conduct arrests? Why does Escambia have more disorderly conduct arrests than many districts combined, right? When teachers come to school every day to keep kids in school and keep them safe, right? And we want to work towards that. So arrest is one. The other is both preventions and interventions. It's not about just responding to the behavior. Sometimes it's about doing things beforehand, right? right? Any dentist will tell you if you brush your teeth daily, it's cheaper than getting your cavities treated or root canals. Any doctor will tell you if you exercise every day, it's cheaper than treating diabetes. So we want to see more preventions, and they've been increasing in Escambia the positive behavioral supports, and in Okaloosa they have their own sort of system as well. But that's all we want is more of that, more interventions, right? What the program that Superintendent Jackson talked about, I think, is one of the best things happening in education, the student training program, because it's responding directly to the behavior. I've seen the curriculum where it's like, if the student's in there for this, all right, we're going to do that. It's not a blanket thing like, oh, sit in this room. It's not Saturday detention where you just sit around, right? So we want to see that replicated and enhanced. Another area deals with training, and this is really important because we want to equip the teachers with the skills. You know, Attorney Waters shares the stories that her daughter, who's, I hope it's all right when we share this, because we have a lot of confidential conversations, but her daughter is a first-year teacher in the district at one of the schools with the highest needs, and she's not equipped with the skills. As someone who's held teaching credentials across the different states, I have to say the bar in Florida is the lowest. So what we're trying to work out in this agreement is different trainings, you know, crisis management, classroom management, de-escalation techniques, you know, understanding students from different backgrounds, making your class more welcoming to even the LGBT students, because we know they get suspended disproportionately as well. So that's the third component, and the fourth and final component deals with just community outreach. So more stuff like this where, all right, the community can have an input, an alternative to just the traditional school board meeting, right? Where they have to talk about transportation and contracts and just all the other stuff you all love to talk about. It's something that will focus specifically on discipline, look at what we could do to improve it. And I'm happy, this is the 4th year that SPLC has had these complaints, but it's the first year where we're actually starting this. And, you know, the fact that we can just sit next to each other and just talk and, you know, and work this through shows that we're starting on a good foot, and I'm really looking forward to everything that's about to happen, and we'll definitely keep you all posted. But I'm happy to announce that we're nearing a resolution after a lot of years and a lot of money. I mean, I've come to Escambia at least once a month, sometimes twice a month, and it's a very beautiful city, don't get me wrong. But it's nice to just stand still sometimes, and there are a lot of other areas, especially when I was looking at Okaloosa, I was just like, I know a lot of districts that have more issues, but we're looking forward to moving forward. Thank you.